All right. I guess we jumped on a little differently, but welcome to another edition of Grown Folks Business on a Thursday evening. Hope you're staying warm because it is a little chilly out there today. But we have some 70-degree weather on the horizon from what I understand. I look forward to it. I'm sure you do too. Just wanted to say hello to Bob and Lisa. Glad to see you again. Lisa, it's been too long. And Mr. Eaton, welcome. I'm not certain if your audio is going to kick in or not, but feel free to type into the private chat box, and I'll be more than happy to share your thoughts on what we discussed this evening. Danya, appreciate as always for handling the behind the scenes stuff. As you all know, police your microphone with the mute button, and we'll make the most with what we have. And I'm always just in such gratitude for people to decide to come share this time with me. And I thank you. So kind of picking up where we left off last week, to an extent, we're talking somewhat about what justice looked like last week. And this week, I'm going to kind of slide into a different stream of thought in terms of how Black Americans deal with some of the societal outcomes and experiences that we do. So tonight's topic is who cares? The Black American experience and PTSD. We alluded to potentially discussing PTSD last week after we unpacked the decision around the man who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. And I'm going to start with him this week with a clip of a time that he was not arrested, but somewhat harassed by some, I won't say somewhat, definitely harassed by some police officers in the area that he lived. And it was an unfortunate situation. There is some explicit language in the video, but I do this to frame tonight's conversation. I do this to kind of put into the air the understanding that things that transpire that Black folks in our society have to deal with have a trauma and a weight that they have to carry. And I'm certain, almost without a shadow of a doubt, that his unfortunate murder, Ahmaud Arbery's, in his mind, more than likely at the time, was what he experienced that I'm about to show you on this video. There's a tenseness, there's a coarseness, and again, there's a weight that many Black Americans have to carry in the society. And it's something that we need to pay more attention to. So again, tonight's show is Who Cares? The Black American Experience and PTSD. And I'm going to show the Ahmaud Arbery clip, a couple of other clips before we come back on the other side and unpack our thoughts around tonight's topic of conversation. So bear with me as I share my screen, and hopefully this goes off without a hitch. Let me get this together. And I'm going to play 3 clips, so just bear with me. We'll play back to back. I think I've got it. Here we go.
You not allowed me to search your car?
You can't go in my seat.
I'm not asking you. Just don't reach the car, man.
You can't
Hands out your pocket.
Down. Warning, down.
Stay on the ground. Just stay on the ground, okay? You off work today?
Just wrapping in the ball.
Gotcha. You got an ID on you, man? I think so. Be right with you, okay? Am I fucking with you?
Yo,
You want to know why I'm fucking with you?
Why?
Keep your hand in your pocket.
I ain't got shit on me. What the fuck you fucking with me for?
I'll tell you why I'm here, man.
Why?
I'll tell you why I'm
Why?
here. Because this area is known for drug activity.
Drug? How the fuck I'm drug and take when I work at Blue Beach?
Back up.
Check my shit.
Back
boy.
up.
The fuck you talking about?
You
Check
wanna
my
back up?
motherfucking shit. Oh, boy.
Turn around, put your hands on the car.
Why?
Turn around, put your
I
hands
ain't
on the
got
car.
no shit. What's up? What
Turn around, put your hands on the car. I'm checking you for weapons. I'm checking you for weapons.
You got no reason to touch me, bro.
I'm not searching you. I'm checking you for weapons. All right, man? You don't have any warrants. I know, but you're coming up on me. Make me kind of nervous. Okay?
You bothering me for nothing. You can't go in my car.
You're not allowing me to search your car?
You can't go in my shit.
I'm not asking you. Just don't reach the car, man. Hands in your pocket.
Down. Warning, down.
Stay on the ground. Just stay on the ground, okay?
Keep your hands out. No, keep
I've already checked you for weapons. I've checked you for weapons.
I'm trying to ease my mind. I'm rapping. I rap, bro. I rap.
I got you, man. But when you run up on me and you get really jumpy, that's going to make me nervous, too.
Aggravate my day. I got 1 day off a week. 1 day.
Okay.
1 day off a week. I'm trying to chill on my day off, bro. I'm
I
up
got
early in the morning trying to chill.
He was very aggravated. Yeah, that was... I tried to tase him.
You did try to taste him?
Yeah.
You got to the point where you had to taste
Well,
him?
it was. I didn't realize he'd already patted him down for weapons. And I could see there's like a wallet or something. And I could see him going like that. He had a big heavy coat on. What moved fast enough.
All right, that's one. I have another one I want to play.
Closing arguments are being held today at the trial of the admitted gunman in that deadly shooting at an historic African-American church in South Carolina. This after the jury heard a chilling 911 call from a survivor of the massacre. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is at the courthouse. Gabe, good morning.
Hoda, good morning. We've covered many trials, but this was among the most disturbing 911 calls we've ever heard. One of 3 survivors of that church massacre showing remarkable strength on the witness stand as she recounted the rampage.
He shot the pastor, he shot all the men in the church. Please come right away.
This morning, the clearest account yet of the horror inside the Charleston church where Polly Shepherd saw 9 of her fellow worshipers and friends massacred.
He's still in here, I'm afraid. He's still in here.
Her 911 call just released after being played in court. Shepherd told the jury how the church members had welcomed Dylan Ruth into their Bible study, but he opened fire while they were praying.
She's a young 21-year-old white dude. Please, Senator, we got some people very hurt, please.
She testified that she dove under a table and Ruth asked, "Did I shoot you?" "No," she responded. And he said, "I'm going to leave you here to tell the story." The 911 dispatcher urged her to stay quiet.
Okay, are you able to get yourself to safety?
Then came more gunshots and moaning
What's going on, Miss Polly?
before the call abruptly ended. Among those killed, Cynthia Hurd, who was shot at least 7 times. Her brother was in the courtroom during the gut-wrenching testimony. How difficult was it to listen to that 911 call?
It was chilling, and it's heartbreaking, but it was necessary pain because I think we have a moral obligation to put racism and discrimination and hatred on trial.
Instead of cross-examining her, Ruth's attorney simply walked up to the witness stand and said, "I'm so sorry." Meanwhile, Ruth says that he will not testify, and the jury is expected to get the case later today. Matt and Hoda.
And one last clip before we discuss.
Erica Garner turned personal tragedy into a public mission. She became a national advocate following the death of her father, Eric Garner, at the hands of a New York City police officer in 2014. His last words, "I can't breathe," a rallying cry for those pushing to reform policing in the U.S.
With cameras or without cameras? With your support or without your support? That's right. I'm going to be out here representing for my father.
Her family tweeted, "She cared when most people wouldn't have. She was good. She only pursued right. No matter what, no one gave her justice."
So we need to vote.
During the 2016 presidential election, Garner used her platform to campaign for Senator Bernie Sanders.
She used her grief and her pain to to fight back and to say that we will have real police department reform in New York and around this country.
Today, Sanders said she was a fighter for justice and will not be forgotten. A young mother of two, inspired to fight by the death of her father.
He raised me to be the fine young lady that I am right now. I know that my father is very proud of me.
NBC News.
All right. I'm glad we were able to, I hope, get that off without a hitch. I play those clips in the order that I did, and with the context and understanding of last week's show being about Ahmaud Arbery, and we actually played a clip concerning Emmett Till's murder. So I do this in that order because, for one, the trauma and tragedy that takes place on the national stage is experienced by us all, but it's felt a different way by Black Americans who, from a historical standpoint, have dealt with the residuals of something like Emmett Till's brutal murder for generations. And also, I just learned, I think today or yesterday, that they're closing the case completely on Emmett Till's murder, because the woman who's still alive, who made the accusations against him, although it was understood that she recanted by the author of the book that came out a couple of years ago about Emmett Till, there's no evidence that the Department of Justice could find to leave the case open. So, yeah, that's a lot of weight. And that weight, while experienced some by the nation, is definitely experienced on a different level by Black Americans. So I wanted to play those clips to give that gravity here, to go back and think about the experiences and the rippling effect that took place with Dylan Roof's murder and murdering of church attendees in South Carolina. And then to kind of give an idea of what that accumulatory effect can have on individuals and on the general public. Eric Garner dies at 27 of a heart attack, and that's tragic. And we know it's without a doubt attached to her father's murder at the hands of a police officer. So I'm almost out of words to try to frame this any further. I hope I've done a decent enough job. I'll start off with a question, and I'll come around. Randall, I'm not certain if you got your audio problem worked out or not, but if you have, I'll come to you. If not, please type into the box whatever you can to respond. I'm going to start with Lisa, but feel free to go where you need to based on the clips I just showed, based on the way I tried to frame it, and you can incorporate this question. And it's a simple one. Simple question to ask, but probably a little harder to answer. But how do we make society care is the question.
Ooh, that's a deep question, Felton, because as you pointed out, you showed you dealt with the Emmett Till issue last week. That was so long ago, yet the same thing is happening. And so even with the onset of the video, onset with social media, how can someone not care that someone gets killed just because their skin is a different color? Malcolm Gladwell has a great book called Talking to Strangers that emphasizes the same thing, but it starts at home, as everybody keeps saying, right? And I think it really is a fear factor of us being afraid of what we don't understand, and things that are different. But I've literally just sat through this presentation of yours, and my body is flushed with pain just because the color of my skin is Black. Now, I have an ex-husband who The color of his skin is like super light. Yet when we did the DNA perspectives, I had 20% European blood, whereas he had 6%, right? You don't know who you're dealing with. And then to just take away a person's ability to breathe just because the skin color, or to, I don't know. I don't have the answers, honestly. And I did want to say this. What do we do? I traveled down I-40 driving to Nashville, Tennessee. And if you've driven I-40 to Nashville, there's a ginormous Confederate flag. I think it's Burke County, maybe Burke or Wayne, somewhere around there. And it looks like it's given the presentation that it is sanctioned by the state of North Carolina, right? Because you can clearly see it on the highway. The terror of me driving in July, just having to pass that flag, but the Sons of the Confederacy, I don't know. Somebody else give me an answer, because what do you do when someone else has no empathy for how something terrorizes you?
Yeah, I think I was on 421 or US 1 over the weekend, and yeah, humongous flag just flying, and the insensitivity, the devil may care attitude about how that may affect others is, yeah, it's something to being bewilderment about. It is. I totally agree with that, Lisa. Bob, I'm going to come to you. Same question. How do we make society care? And again, Randall, if you can type out the thoughts in the chat or the comments box, or just let us know if you've gotten your microphone straightened out. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I know the flag Lisa's talking about. And it's so close to the interstate, it feels like it has to be on the right of way of the interstate. And it does trigger a particularly visceral response because it's so close. It's so right there. My answer to that question, Felton, is it has to become this. All of this has to become more personal to the crowd of people that aren't so directly impacted by it. And yeah, I had lunch. Well, first of all, let me kind of frame this. I have a 33-year-old son. I have a 31-year-old son. And so put my fatherhood kind of in perspective as I make these other comments. I have young men, Black friends that I've known for a long time because they've been friends of my sons. I know other young men, Black people, because I've met them myself. I have other young men, Black friends that are dear, dear friends. I have other young, dear Black people in my life that I greatly value. And I can tell you, and I said this to someone the other day, I said this to two different people the other day. I have a worry. I carry with me a worry, a great worry about those Black people that I don't even carry about my own sons.
That's a strong observation from a parent, regardless of race. But I think it's an informed observation on your part. But continue. I just had to get that out.
No, and it's rooted in, and I said this to a fellow I had lunch with the other day. I said, "You've never told me any stories, but I know you have stories." And he began to tell me stories. And I knew he had stories. I don't have stories like that. My boys don't have stories like that. Every Black man I know, not necessarily every, probably every, has stories. And I know they have stories, and they have multiple stories. And I'm 66 years old, and I don't have a single story. And the only story that either of my sons has is a story where the police supervisor came down to the situation and blew out the policeman, not my son. And, you know, I am closer and closer to people who are closer and closer to a world of stories and a history of stories and a history of extraordinary pain and I don't know how it's held. I don't know how it is not just crushing.
I definitely want to steer from that point of commentary that you just made back to Lisa. Oh, Randall, you got your microphone working?
So you can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you now. Great.
Okay.
So, Lisa, I'm going to come back to you. Be gathering your thoughts on this subject matter as a Black mother. That residue, that rippling in the pond that occurs when you might witness some trauma visit a young Black male, which it does more often than not, and how you always have that in the back of your mind. I think you shared that with me before, so I want to unpack that some. But Randall, glad you got your microphone working. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
Business, and glad you could join us. And I hope you've been spurred to have some thoughts and share out if you do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I could hear you all and see you all fine. But I was invited by Chandler Vaughn. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and I'm on the Divine Nine Legislative Day Planning Committee. Don't know if you all have had a chance to participate or not, but I've been on the committee for since its inception. And she sent this to all of the planning committee and asked us to join if we'd like to join. So that's how I got here tonight. I serve as the chair for voter registration, education, mobilization for the states of North Carolina and South Carolina for Omega Psi Phi. So enough about me, but some thoughts along that line. I have a 24-year-old son, and probably when he was about 20 or 21, he's a pro wrestler. Just like they have AAA baseball, they have same thing like for AAA wrestling. So he's like one level from being on TV. So he was coming out of Asheville, North Carolina at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And we've been blessed enough where I've been able to pass my hand-me-down Mercedes down to him. He was stopped by a white state trooper at 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't know if you all are familiar, with Lincoln County, because I don't know where you all are from, but it's in Lincoln, North Carolina. And the trooper stopped him and asked him if he knew how fast he was driving. He said no. He said, well, take a guess. And he told him about 70 to 75 miles per hour. The speed limit was 70. The trooper, according to my son, then asked him whose car was he driving. Plainly on the license tags, his name is Randall Eaton II. He had given him his registration and driving license, and he wanted to know, how can a young black man like you be driving a car like this? So I'd already told my son that this is probably going to happen to you. And I was hoping that it wouldn't, but sure enough, it did. And according to him, the trooper was extremely smart and told him to sit there. And was he sure that that was his car and that it had not been stolen while he was coming out of Asheville, North Carolina? Now, if my son had been a smart aleck, the chances of that night turning differently very well could have changed at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it would have been that trooper's word against my son's word. So when I see videos like this, that's the first thing that comes to my mind as to what could have happened to my son, just as it happened to Ahmaud Arbery, in the last year or so. So those kind of stories resonate with me because I have a 25-year-old son that experiences this just because of the skin color and the car that he drives.
And I'm just going to interject that I completely agree with Randall.
Randall, you had any other thoughts you want to unpack on the matter? I definitely appreciate you personalizing it. I appreciate you bringing that to the table. That's the residue, man. That is the PTSD that we experience, that we carry with us. And it's something I don't think we put out to be totally wrestled with. We kind of internalize it and we hope for the best.
Right.
My mom, my grandma, they praying women. My grandmother was a praying woman. So you internalize it and you hope for the best.
Yeah.
Go ahead. If you have more to say, go ahead.
Yeah. And I was saying, he thinks about that. He says every time that he leaves home, because his girlfriend is Caucasian. So he says when he's going up and down 485 or 85, driving a Mercedes Benz, and he has a young white woman on the car with him, he is very, very, very conscious about that. So those are things that, he can't even leave home and be comfortable, because that's what he has to think about. Just whether he's going to the supermarket or wherever, those are things that, that he thinks about every time he leaves home.
Yeah, I think those are, psychologically speaking, the ramifications for being black in American society to an extent. You do have more to concern yourself with than some of the other citizens that inhabit this great nation. Lisa, if you've had time to kind of massage your thoughts, Black mother.
Well, I want to answer that first question real quick now that I've gathered myself a little bit better, because I did have a conversation with a middle-aged white woman once, right after George Floyd. And she was like, Lisa, what can an old white lady do? I said, as a supporter, engage other white people outside of people of color. And, unpack how you feel and demystify the blackness of society so that maybe more people can be converted to better acceptance and tolerance. Because as I did talk about once in the book by Sarah Williamson that said, Waking Up White, is that white America can literally live their entire lives, work, shopping, and not have to interact with Black people. But there is, not that I'm aware of yet, a place in America where Black people can exclusively only deal with other Black people. So PTSD is real in this respect, because as a mom, I bought the movie, the documentary about Emmett Till. I wasn't born. I think my parents may have been a year or two old. But it so resonated with me that mom was getting a break for the summer, right? And sending her kid down south. And with me having 3 African American boys, one of them is 6'5". I think he's about 6'5" by now. And then another 6 feet, and another is like 5'10" and a half. And so, and as you know, Felton, you're, not height challenged, that level of dominance vertically offers a certain authority. And so for everything that my sons do, I had a son that was recently in Asheville about 3 weeks ago, and he's the one that's like 6'5", and I'm like, I'm praying that whole weekend, because I mean, and so every time I got a phone call, I was like, okay, this is from his phone. Hopefully he's okay. And then he's 21. So, and then being brought up in this era, oh, I'm fine. But he's naive to a certain respect, but I have hammered so much into him. How can you be naive? So the prayer, like, I may wake up in the middle of the night and one of my sons is on my spirit, and I literally pray at that moment because of this. I do have a child that gets off work at 5 in the morning, and he drives a luxury car that he pays for. But because of that, I have a different set of fears that I have to literally pray away, or else I can't get no sleep. Because the young people today, they haven't been faced with as much as I was bused. Like, I was bused to 5 different schools in the same address in the 70s. And then I've been told by white people, oh, you're pretty to be a Black girl. Like, beauty is exclusive to white people. So I've got to pray away those fears, or else I can see why Erica had a heart attack. Because I love Bob and I love some white friends, but every white person I encounter, I have this flush comes across me. I wonder. And especially if they're over 50, 60 years old, right? Were they at the lynching parties, right? That's PTSD. And I didn't see any lynching, but I've seen I'm carrying, I feel it. Like, I'm still physically feeling what these people experienced in the church. But anyway, so to the point with being this Black mom, I can't see how a mother of Black children, let alone Black men, can survive without literally praying these fears away, or putting your kids in a cage. And you can't put them in a cage, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. That I feel like if I asked my mother, or if my grandmother was still here and asked the same question, those would be her sentiments. There's an innate fear. There's a danger that's ever present, and it's not escapable. It's just not. Money doesn't change it. Wrong place, wrong time can just remind you of a history associated with Black Americans that is jarring. You brought up George Floyd, and that was my next question. And I've phrased this in a certain way before to give it some breath, but I think it's a question that now I attach to the notion of PTSD. And I said, does the murder, or did the murder of George Floyd give us all, give the nation PTSD? I often spoken about in the past the near perfect storm of circumstance that allowed for everybody to sit with that tragedy. COVID's happening and people are just at home and they're showing this knee on the neck moment repeatedly and extensively, and George Floyd's name becomes household. So Yeah. Did we all get a dose of PTSD at that moment? Randall, I'll start with you.
I personally don't think that we all did, because I've heard so many comments, whether it be from people in my neighborhood or on social media, blaming George Floyd for the actions that he took, and that if he hadn't done this, and this, and obeyed, that never would have happened. So in my mind, I don't think that we all as society believe that what the officer did was wrong. I think we in the Black community, and even young people, I'm gonna use millennials for an example. It appears to me that they all came together, and it wasn't on as widespread, at least from my observation, as segregated among younger people as it was with people my age or older, saying, in a sense, I got it. Well, he got what he deserved. If he had just did what the officers told him to do, he'd be here today. Or he had drugs in his system, or he'd been to prison. So all of those reasons was a reason for him to lose his life.
Yeah, the tricky thing about PTSD is that it does not necessarily show itself in a form of sympathy or empathy for what happened. So I would agree with you, Randall, that there was not a consensus of sympathy or understanding of how unnecessary that moment was. But that PTSD can show itself in that resignation to it being justified. So I would even make the argument that some of the people that you're discussing are showing those symptoms in just the other direction. Lisa, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, so akin to as I can think of slavery, like when they beat to death somebody who stepped out of line, and then everyone else toes the line. So it's like, well, it's many people walking around with drugs in their system. I mean, we had a whole judge here who died. So it's that still does not. So to your point, Felton, yes. That's a form of PTSD too, is that to expect that Black people need to be absolutely perfect in order to not lose their lives for stepping out of line. But to answer the question, no, I don't think that enough people are suffering with the PTSD because there has not been a remarkable change. They're still fighting over infrastructure to support, impoverished people. I mean, honestly, if there was a remarkable PTSD wave, I would have thought that there would be what is the 40 acres and a mule collectively
reparations.
That's the word. Because if you don't understand that happens all the time, people just happen to have been home, and then they started saying, oh, this happens all the time, all the reports that said, oh, this happens all the time, then you would have been more open-minded if you would have really suffered the PTSD and like, wow, this happens all the time, let's do something remarkable to stop some of this. So I haven't seen anything remarkable happen. So it lasted while it lasted, and then some people are being made examples of, but until I see some remarkable systemic changes that account for all of the murders, like all of the murders, then no, this is symbolic at best to me.
Yeah, you desire something I do. That's tangible things, transformative acts. That's the medicine for the PTSD. That's what may make us healthier as a society. Bob, I know we've discussed this previously, and I don't want to answer it for you. So give us a quick understanding of your thoughts on the murder of George Floyd being giving us all a dose of PTSD.
Yeah, I don't think this stuff is still not personal enough for white people. It's simply not personal enough. And as long as it sits in the academic or the intellectual and it's not personal, we can say what we say, we can articulate all of the right words, but it doesn't change anything. It doesn't move the needle. Privileged people, particularly white privileged people, respond to what truly touches them. And they will not tolerate what touches them. But until it truly, in a personal way, touches them, there's a distance. It's no different than thinking about the sadness of people in Afghanistan. I mean, it's that, you know, I can have sympathy, but it's not personal. It has to become personal.
Proximity plays a significant role, Bob, and that's exactly what makes things personal. You being intimately close and tied to whatever's happening and it affecting you in some way. That actually, I want to start with you, Bob, here, and you can expand upon your thoughts, but it's because you brought up the personal element. My final question before we get out of here for this evening is in that personal realm. So I'd love to hear your answer. Again, starting with you, Bob. On a base level, as individuals, what have you done or do you do to combat this lack of care? I'll answer first just for the simplicity of it because it may be helping get along context. But on a base level, as individuals, what have you done or do you do to combat the lack of care? Personally speaking, I am hypercritical of media. I know if you know me, you know that. I'm very critical of what is produced by Hollywood and what is propped up in the various forms of communication to the society, the greatest teaching tool we have, and how it fails Black Americans with suspect and stereotypical depictions and things that are not reflective of the greatness that lies in our community. So I'll start with that. That is something I'm doing. So Bob.
The conversations I have involve begging people to walk across the street. And there's a thing that I'm noticing more and more that is just agonizing to me, and that is, well, if they would only comply, and those are my words. If nobody ever says comply, but it's like what we were talking about this morning. Well, if Black sounding names are disadvantageous to Black children, why don't they just name them differently? Or, you know, they need to get over it. If they would just do this or that or this or that or this or that. And you know, this business around what I call compliance with a standard that works for us. So I think, I mean, I don't like to talk about what I do, but I arguing against that is probably something, and I argue it in the Black community, quote unquote, which I don't like that phrase, by the way. I do not like the phrase Black community, because Black is not, there are multiple Black communities. Prosperous Black people often say the same thing as white people: just comply. I argue with those Black people the same thing. That should not be necessary. That should not be necessary. Why should it be necessary? So I argue that in both realms, and I argue in favor of, conversation came up this morning. Am I being intrusive if I go to this restaurant over here that is principally attended to by Black people? Am I intruding? Like, fuck no. Go. And Felton, you were in part of that conversation. So yeah, and
Yeah.
Lisa, I know I know what you said earlier about your guard around white people, even though you love me, and I know that. I respect that, and I understand that, and I have nothing but respect and consideration about that, because it makes sense to me.
Appreciate that, Bob. Yeah, a lot to be said, but more to be done, and that's what I pretty much take away. Conversations are necessary, but so is action. You know, crossing that street, that metaphorical street you're talking about, is very necessary. Randall, I'm going to come to you next, and then I'm going to save Lisa for last. So if you need me to repeat the question, I can, or if you feel like you have an understanding of the individual contribution, what are you doing on a personal level? Have it.
Okay. Some of the things are very similar to what Bob is talking about, in addition to, as I did, either sharing experiences that I've had or that my son has had, or members of my family, or just people that I know. And one of the things that I really like that Bob said, that I do the same thing, and I'm sure you, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Danya, can relate to this. I do this a lot in barbershops, because when I go to a barbershop and go to a Black barbershop, oftentimes the conversation, as Bob talked about, in society's eyes, there's different kind of Black communities. And I hear a lot of white folks, white folks, white folks, white folks, white folks. And so I try to have the conversation about, yeah, but it's Black folks, Black folks, Black folks too. So there's a lot of people that are racist. So it's not that only white people are racist. So I try to have that conversation. Sometimes it doesn't go very well. But those are things that I have decided I'm going to do this because I think it's the right thing to do. Now, whether you like it or you don't like it, this is my opinion, and I'm going to share my opinion. And if you don't want to know my opinion, then don't ask me, or let's not have this conversation. Because you and I, and all of us, know that when you talk about politics and religion and racism, the conversation can turn sideways in a matter of seconds, not minutes, but seconds. So, and then the other thing, as I said, is I try to share my own experiences. I've had people, white co-workers, I'm retired now, but when I share my experiences, they say, I can't believe that happened to you. Well, why can't you believe that happened to me? Because you work here, you live here, you do this. So I said, well, that doesn't make any difference of where I live or what I do. And they said, I never would have thought that. And I've had employees especially now that I've retired, to come back and say, hey, we're going to have a diversity conversation. Can I get your point of view as an African-American male as to how I can give some thoughts as a white person? Because they want to, although they may not have experienced it, they want to be able to talk about, I understand, or have the rest of the races within this meeting thought about what Randall may have gone through. So those are some of the things.
Yeah, man. Two takeaways. One, man, you know, they sometimes find it amazing that something happens to someone they know on that intimate level, because it confirms an ugliness that exists in society that they're just not desiring to have to engage with. And knowing you personally is, hey, man, you know, how did that happen to you? It's just not believable because they know you on a different level. Another thing I want to say, and it must be meant for me to unpack this or put this on the table sooner than later, because the conversation this morning ended and we didn't get back into this realm of discussion about racism. As a person who looks through the lenses of history and has ideas concerning what racism is as a practice, I don't assign it to Black Americans so much. Prejudices, yes. Racism has a way of being expressed through power dynamics, and it's tough for me to assign that to that power dynamic to Black Americans, because literally speaking, we don't own enough things to flex on that level towards white people. But prejudices, absolutely. Everybody has prejudices and biases and things of that nature. So I definitely understand the conversation that you may have in the barbershops to a degree. But when it comes to that racist piece, and it's a conversation, I'm always here for it, Randall. So I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate you sharing. And I hope you come back. I really do. And bring a friend or two. We just tell it like it is and just have good conversations. And it's not always heavy topics. Christmas is coming up, so I'll get some holiday cheer. And Lisa, take us home with your final thoughts on the last question. If you need me to go back over it, I will. But it's just about the personal thing. What are you doing? What are you doing as an individual?
Well, I have to admit that I do feel embarrassed about being Black around white people and exposing that vulnerability, like exposing the vulnerability of being on the receiving end of prejudice. But what I am doing is putting my embarrassment for having my ancestors gone through slavery and things like that, and having hard conversations with white people before. So if I see that a Black person has said some things about being Black and I'm in a room with white people and the white people are scratching their head and kind of like, you know, that's not a big deal, whatever. I do take and have side conversations and try to break down that Black person's perspective. Okay. And I'm pretty good at being elementary about how that how they may be feeling based on this particular thing. And it's a tough conversation for me to have because as Randall said, and I'm sure you experienced this, Felton, you know, when you are articulate, right, or you're perceived in the, you know, and welcomed in the white circle, you know, they don't expect that you're going to even rock the boat by saying, but no, Black people have been excluded when you put that word education in there. And so if that person experienced that in the 50s and 60s, then that's a PTSD moment. That's and have it, that's tough. It's tough for me to even, because I feel like I've got to kind of shrink down and admit to how bad we were treated just for the color of our skin. And with me being this, you know, assertive person who want to put that, I want to put that behind me too, except I see you don't get it. So let me go have a conversation with you. But on the flip side of that, what I'm talking to Black people about is no, we don't own anything. So get some things that you can own to assert your power. Stop going to that Walmart that treats you like shit. Oh, excuse me. Like, don't do that. Buy something. So let's see. If the man illegally evicts you, if you own the house, he can't do that, can they? So don't put $500 on your feet. Put $500 into your contribution for that down payment assistance money that the city of Greensboro have, and you can't get illegally evicted. So what I try to do is address it on both sides. And I'm tough in the Black community, but I have to expose my own vulnerabilities when I'm dealing with white people. And that's rough, but I'm doing it. God bless America.
Absolutely. That's I don't know if I should end it on those words or not, but Randall, you had something you wanted to add before we get out of here?
No, I was just trying to find out where you all are from.
Greensboro.
Okay. So I have a lot of friends in Greensboro. Like you all may know them, Warren Austin or Clarence Greer.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to talk on the other side, in case you're saying some people's names that might not want to be said, we can't. If you want to just stay with us when we sign off, I'll talk to you in just a moment, if that's okay.
That's fine, because I would like to invite them to this.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can talk on the other side of this. I'm gonna get us out of here, but do not get off the line, Randall. We'll talk on the other side just after we sign off. Listen, Lisa, this is just something I'll say, and we'll talk later. But always bring your whole self. Bring no shame. Black folks should have a lot of pride in the level of survival that we've had to attain and to still exist in this place. And I love it here with all its warts and scars. I do. I'm a Black American, proud of it. So everyone have a wonderful evening. Danya, as always, appreciate you. Christmas is around the corner. I promise to be a little more jolly next week. We'll reflect on this past year, and we'll talk about our past Christmases and what was so wonderful about them. Lisa, thank you. Bob, thanks. Again, Danya, appreciate you. Randall, thank you for joining us. Everyone have a wonderful night. Take care and stay warm.
Sleep well.